Hetapu, Alafia, Namaste, Tashahau, Assalamu alaikum, Jah Rising, Grand Rising to all. This is our pre-recorded solstice lecture for Saturday, December the 18th, 2021, which I have named December the 25th, the Mass created for the masses. It comes to you courtesy Ma'akuru Universal, Shrine of Dendera in New York, and Ifa Oj, Temple of Cosmic Art, Tukushad Philosophy, and Liroglyphs, Shrine of Aripo in New York and in Trinidad and Tobago. I would like to draw to your attention this astronomical fact concerning the winter solstice, which is mentioned in the Christian Bible. And you can look for that yourself. What really happens during the winter solstice that the writer had failed to tell us? Remember, the Most High did not write this because it has no hands. 2 human hands did. What was his background, his education, his culture, his socialization, spiritual aptitude? Was he an initiate? One has the freedom to ask these questions without trepidation, as well as to examine the evidence. This winter solstice has been occurring since the earth was created, some 6 million years ago, according to the National Geographic Society, USA. So this is just something that the writer discovered, but astronomical science knowledge that existed long before he was born. Knowledge that prevailed in ancient Africa, in Canaan, in Mesopotamia, in China, and in India before the rise of Western states built by Caucasians. They were not yet around, and I don't mean to be facetious, but you can do your research on that yourself. This year, the winter solstice would occur on Tuesday, December the 21st, 2021, with astronomical precision, whether we like it or not. In other words, it must happen, whether we are Jew, Christian, Hindu, Muslim, Rastafarian, or atheist. This would be the shortest day of the year, December the 21st. For the sake of clarity, I would like to use as an object lesson the spinning top as a toy made and used by the Caribbean children in their yards with their friends. My brother and his friends used to make these tops out of wood and sometimes out of green guava because it's hard. Stick a nail in it, wrap some twine around it, and skillfully spin it on the hard surface of our yard. With everyone looking with deep curiosity, he will scoop it up in the palm of his hand and watch it spin there. On the dirt yard, we would all comment on how it tilted or leaned to one side. You would hear children say, "You ain't see how that top leaning, boy? Nice, eh?" As it spun or rotated on the nail as its axis. Then while rotating, it will slowly go around my brother as if orbiting. So if my brother were the sun, the S-U-N, the top would orbit around this S-U-N while spinning around on its axis in a tilted fashion. So it did 2 things. It rotated and it orbited. Now these were intense games of friendly rivalry in which children would be creating, spinning, and watching their top for the entire day, sometimes without food and drink in the broiling hot sun. This is astronomy in our Caribbean yards. Every child knew how to make a top and how to make a kite from scratch. According to NASA USA, there are about 300 million more Earths in the Milky Way. But let us take a look at our Earth. 300 million more Earths? Wow. Why are we talking about Earth? Well, for one thing, our persons with its earthly bodies live on planet Earth, which is about 93 million miles away from the sun. yet we get its rays. We are thus part of the universe, or part of the 50 billion multiverses which continue to expand. We spiritual beings, and we are not human beings. We are spirits in a human body. So we spiritual beings are not an afterthought of creation, but are an intrinsic part of the cosmic fabric or of the total multiversal scenario. There is this cosmic relationship that exists between the universe and man that we simply cannot ignore. The universe is in us, and we are in the universe. What is out there is also in us. The Most High dwells in each and every one of us, as we were created to be its vehicles, or as some would prefer to say, its vessels. That is why the power, the glory, the divine knowledge, and the wisdom are in us, because the kingdom of heaven is within us. That is the true meaning. Stop looking outside of yourself for the Most High with lifting hands, shouts, and praises of adoration. That is Western cultic behavior. The Most High lives within you. There is this fear to go deep within. Yet we must learn to go deep within into eternity as our ancestors did. Let us understand our sun. That's the S-U-N. It gives light, life, and fuel to the earth. Without the S-U-N, there will be no life. That is why it is said, he that has the sun has life. The S-U-N, that is. Because without the S-U-N, there will be no life on earth. The ancients had their own symbol for the sun, which was a circle with a cross in it. That cross represented the 4 seasons of the year: spring, summer, autumn, and winter, not evil or evil obia. Remember, these were very ancient people who documented the science of the universe that was all around them for posterity. You know, they were farmers and, they worked with the earth. So whatever happened with regard to the earth was very important to them. Moon and sun and stars was very important, and rain. Modern man has very little time for this. He has divorced himself from nature. He tries to fight nature, to harness it. He exploits nature without understanding the damages, thus destroying the earth. And that is why there's global warming. Another symbol for the sun was that of a circle with a crown of thorns around it, or with rays of sunlight around it, much like a sunbeam flower. This was the symbol for the risen S-U-N, with its crown of thorns, coming in its glory every morning, the giver of life. So our ancestors were guided by cosmic science, the knowledge of the universe. The sun was very important in their lives, as it did in Trinidad and Tobago when I was a child. The rising of the sun never met my mother in bed. She had to greet and get the first energy of the S-U-N. We children had to collect clothes from the clothesline and get inside our homes before sundown while watching the setting sun, S-U-N. My dad will rush into Port of Spain for an errand before it got dark. It is modern industrial man who has failed to understand how ancient religion was tied into all of this, into nature. Our people did not worship nature as falsely stated, but for them, that which was not seen with the naked eye, spiritual things, were seen and understood by that which was seen, nature. In other words, observing nature was a way to understand spiritual phenomena. Therefore, it is a fallacy to say that our ancient ancestors worshipped the sun, and Western scholars and religious leaders still propagate this. They never did. And there was no sun god S-U-N God, which they worshipped, either. It is Westerners who could not understand their religion and culture, their symbolism as a shorthand way of documenting this knowledge of the universe. It only appeared that way to Europeans because they were left brain and still are left brain thinkers from a left brain dominant culture. They wrongfully interpreted what they saw. And since they could not understand right brain spiritual concepts, they demonized it, and the world bought it. I don't think anyone would worship the symbol for McDonald's, which is the golden arch, nor worship the symbol for the hospital, which is the blue and white capital H. They can certainly be informed by it, but not worship it. Symbols are everywhere, giving us information. Ra is not a sun god. It is Westerners who said so. Ra is the energy that we get from the S-U-N. We all get it. That Ra in man is called Heru and Shango, which carries its own symbols. He that has the energy of the S-U-N or the Ra from the sun would always have life. What Westerners saw was people practicing Erisa Ankh in Kemet, which is a type of Qigong, yoga, Qigong, Tai Chi, in which they greeted the energy of the S-U-N called sun salutation, S-U-N salutation, not S-O-N worship, as anyone who practices yoga would do. A practice which I think will come into the church very soon. They will call it Christian yoga, so as to separate it from its true identity in India. They always do. This is what our people would practice early in the morning or during the midday sun. In the book of Acts, the Apostle Paul had an aha or rising moment during midday sun. Think about it. Why midday sun? What is the Bible trying to tell us? Do you remember the time when some churches in Trinidad demonized dance, especially African dance, calypso and soca dance, even the steel pan, which for them was an instrument of Satan? I remember in the 70s, pastors used to say, "Get rid of that demon in your foot and don't bring that devil thing in my church," until a priest from the Trinity Anglican Cathedral in Port of Spain defied that and brought steel pan in the church. Women who wore jewelry were called Jezebels, and silly women laden with sins who came to tempt the pastor with lust, as if he did not have his own lust. Now those very pastors call it sacred dance, have steel bands in their churches, with their daughters wearing fitted jeans and lipstick which cover their entire lips, all of which is now included in their services. And that is because white Christians from the developed countries did it. My friend was practicing some Qigong in front of a tree, and that practicing of the Qigong is to harness the Qi from the tree into her body. And she was doing so in Prospect Park in Brooklyn, when a Christian woman declared to all that my friend was worshiping the tree, and that is in modern America. Plain ignorance and reactionary thinking and behavior. Let us talk about this matter of the lazy O. The Old English word for the sun, S-U-N, is S-U-N-N-E, while the Dutch for the S-O-N is S-O-N-N-E. Look at the sound. These are homonyms. They sound the same way, but they are different words. The planet, Old English is S-U-N-N-E, and the Dutch for sun is S-O-N-N-E. This is the etymology for the word son, S-O-N, which came from S-O-N-N-E. Medieval writers would sometimes use them interchangeably. S-O-N for S-U-N and S-U-N for S-O-N. And this was considered a lazy attitude. That is why it was called a lazy O, meaning failure to use the O in the right way. It is this state of confusion that helped to create sun worship by Westerners, S-U-N worship by Westerners, which developed into their SON worship. As I said, ancient people did not worship the SUN. They watched its movement and understood its presence in their lives and greeted it at the appropriate time. It is Westerners who saw this, maybe encrypted on the walls of pyramids and other temples, and said, oh, they worship, these are their gods. Now, so far we know that the earth rotates on its axis with a tilt, and that the earth orbits around the sun. The earth's tilted axis and its orbit around the sun are the driving forces behind the solstices, not the earth's rotation. The sun does not move. It is the earth that moves. The rotating creates night and day, while a full orbit is about 365 days. So we also clarify this matter of the lazy O. Yes, the earth rotates on its axis, tilting a bit, I emphasize, to accommodate the rotating. At the same time, I emphasize, it orbits around the sun. That's the tilt. The North Pole is tilted farthest away from the sun. Wow, the SUN. So darkness there would set in early because it gets fewest hours of sunlight. And just think about the spinning top that I mentioned. In fact, the Arctic North would have 24 hours of darkness per day for 6 months. Can you imagine that because of that tilt? Equatorial regions would have 12 hours of darkness per day. North America would have about 12 and a half hours of darkness per day. With darkness setting in earlier, there would be longer nights and shorter days. That is why in America we set the clock backwards in order to make more use of daylight. So on the 21st of December, from our standpoint on Earth, the sun appears to reach its lowest point or declination going south. That's 23.4 degrees. It is now in the constellation of stars that form a cross, which is called the Southern Cross or the Southern Cross. It is not a literal cross, but as I said, a constellation of stars that look like a cross. That's where the sun is, the SUN. This is astronomy that directly relates to us. Astronomy and astrology are good things, not evil. The SUN is said to be dead. That's on the 21st of December because it reaches its lowest point. So it is said to be dead and buried for these 3 days. December the 21st, December the 22nd, and December the 23rd. 3 days it is dead and buried. And that's the SUN because it is in this constellation of the Southern Cross. You see, cross and 3 and buried and dead. And that's the SUN. Solstitium is the Latin word, for those of us who remember our Latin. Solstitium is the Latin word for the sun standing still. You see? This is the winter solstice. This is the winter solstice, those 3 days. In countries in the south, such as Trinidad and Tobago, this period is called the summer solstice. And this is about the SUN and not the SON. So Trinidad and Tobago will experience its summer solstice when the north is experiencing the winter solstice. And in Trinidad and Tobago, dawn will come early and dusk will come late. So 7 o'clock in the night could be full of light. Long days and short nights. The sun will be high, especially at noon, with short noontime shadows. So at noon, you may notice that your shadow is very short. These are things that I'm not making up. These are things that you can experience yourself. The Apostle Paul, again, taking charge during the midday sun, that is the Heru or Shango in him, must have been referring to this. Last week, I viewed a virtual funeral that took place at 1:30 p.m. in Trinidad, but simultaneously at 12:30 p.m. in New York because of this turning back of the clock. Those 3 days of the death and burial of the sun, as it does not move, are when the spirit, and I want you to remember this, those 3 days are when the spirit in man is open to make deep transformational changes. It is the time when the spirit can get pregnant with new ideas, thoughts, sublime teachings more than any other time. You see, those 3 days, look how it ties in with the spirit of man. You see, the solstice and man. Mankind's spirit opens. It was created to open, to receive sublime truths during that period, during the solstices and during the equinoxes. That's the time. During the full moons, that's the time. We were wonderfully created. That is how the Creator made us. That's the tie. That's one of the ties with the universe. Any seed sown in the spirit at this time would without doubt bear fruit, good or bad. It is the time for inner contemplation, rest, repair, for uprooting sin and evil by going deep within and impregnating seeds of righteousness in its place. So it's coming up the 21st, is a couple days away. On December the 24th, something spectacular happens. The sun makes 1 degree turn northwards. It's turning now, as if springing back into its life-giving function. It brings more daylight with longer days and shorter nights, leading to spring in March. People around the world still gather to witness the return of the risen S-U-N, coming in its glory and in its crown of thorns to give light and life to the earth. Let me say that again. People around the world still gather to witness the return of the risen sun, S-U-N, coming in its glory with its crown of thorns to give life to the earth. Druids, and we're looking at around 3000 or 2000 BC, used to do it. Their descendants still gather to witness this sunrise at Stonehenge in Wiltshire in England. They still do it. Let me just correct this thing here. These stones were perfectly aligned by their ancestors to allow for the burst of glorious sunshine to flood the area on that day. The pyramids of Giza in Egypt, built by blacks, the Kamau, in perfect alignment with the sun, do the very same thing. These ancient life scientists welcomed the sun, not worshipped it. This is called the turning of the sun as the days got longer with more sunlight. With the Most High dwelling within them as Osir, there was no S-O-N for ancient Egyptians to worship, because the Most High dwelled in them, and they knew that. On December the 25th, as long as the spiritual work is done, the divine in man will come forth. See that? We want the divine in man, the Most High, to come forth and shine, so that when people look at you, they see the brilliance, they see divinity. And on the 25th of December, as long as the work is done, the divine in man would come forth. While the risen S-U-N, you see, it is God's S-U-N, it always comes back. So while the risen S-U-N, which is the risen Savior, because it saves life on earth, bringing light and life, will come forth in its glory in the skies. So you can see a brilliant sun. You can see this yourself. You can experience this yourself. And Sirius would shine with its magnificence, incandescence, as the brightest star in the skies. Look at that. You can see that. And there would be the 3 wise men, Mintaka, Al-Nilan, and Al-Nitak, or the 3 smaller stars, or the hunter in the belt of Orion, which will be visible in a straight line. You can check somewhere in the book of Job, and there is mentioned Orion and the Pleiades. You see, you will see these three wise men. The ancient people call them the three wise men. They were not literal men or magi's or magicians. The three wise men are always there in the presence of Sirius in the skies, which is the brightest star on the 25th of December. And you will also see the sun brilliant during the daytime. If you look at the skies on these days, depending on where you live, you will see all of this, although you may not understand its meaning and how it applies to you. You see, heavens within and nature outside truly sing together in cosmic harmony on December the 25th. Yes, indeed, joy to the world, the light in man has come forth. Osir is that light. This is what makes December the 21st to the 25th a happy, joyful experience. This is true religion. It comes out of nature. Not giving and shopping till you drop. That's not about December the 25th. A Christmas tree, Santa Claus, carols, Kiss Me for Christmas, and all of these songs. A white Christmas really has nothing to do with December the 25th. Let's talk about what happened, how this trend